we're so pleased now to be joined by one of the directors of BS High, and that's Martin Desmond Rowe. Martin, it's Maggie and Perloff. Thanks so much for the time. How are you?
Thank you for having me on. I'm doing great, thank you.
I can't imagine the response that you've got from this documentary. Everyone who I talk to who has also seen it, the first thing we go to is, boy, that coach, Roy Johnson, the coach of Bishop Sycamore. How would you describe him to people?
Well, I think I'll use his own words. He's con man-ish. He's a charming, hilarious, incredible storyteller, very smart, and completely self-obsessed. The kind of guy that just says whatever he needs to do, whatever he needs to say to get whatever he wants. So
you've done a lot of these documentaries, obviously. Did he change in front of the camera, or is he a different person before and after you were filming?
So Roy's, we began the process of the film by doing 3 full 10-hour days with just Roy, just interviewing. Because in a pre-interview, we met him. He was in a car talking to us on a FaceTime thing, and he was like, he had sunglasses half on, half off. He was performing for us and telling us some of the stories that made the film, where he was just very clearly self-incriminating himself with things he shouldn't have been telling us. And we're like, all right, well, this guy is clearly the story. And we did 3 days with him. And yes, he told us every story that's in the film. He told us multiple times in multiple different ways, in multiple different tones, depending on what he thought we wanted to hear. So with Roy, the question was, what does the truth look like? What actually, which of these versions is true? And we pushed him as hard as we could to get through that. And then obviously we went and fact checked everything. And that's where everything really kind of came to life.
Yeah, I mean, you could really leave out the ish on the con man part. I mean, the way that he sort of, I want to say, baited these young men and kind of sold them on a dream, which was, if you come play for me and play hard, I can get you into a Division I school and you can be playing Division I football. I mean, of all the things, the lies he told to the kids or the bad situations he put those young men in, what do you think was some of the worst?
Well, I mean, these were, intentionally the kind of kids he was talking to were kids from challenging homes, challenging backgrounds, and actually Bomani Jones, who's in the film, he says it most powerfully, I think, which is coach. If you're called coach, that's like a term like doctor. It means something, especially to young men who are entrusting themselves to somebody. Oh, coach, because you're called coach, how to make me better, how to make me stronger, how to help me get the thing I want. But instead of that, he basically taught them cons themselves. Like every single year, 4 years of the school, every single year, they would go to a different housing facility, like a apartment complex or a hotel, and he would sign up with a net 90 pay schedule. So you don't have to pay till, the end, you don't have to pay for the first month you're there till the last month you're there. So every single time he would have them move in at the beginning of the season, and then by the end of the season, he'd never paid a bill and they would get evicted. And sometimes these evictions were in the kids' names. And so he was including them in cons. He was including them in crimes. He was teaching them from the position of coach that all that matters is getting whatever's right in front of you. And so in terms of like the specifics of what he did, there's so many in the film to choose from in terms of the specific ways in which he betrayed these kids' trust. But I would say that the overarching thing is he taught them not to trust. I think he taught them that everybody, even the people we put on a pedestal and we say, hey, believe in these people, even those people are just criminals and liars. And you could see that in all these kids' faces. Quincy, one of the boys in there, his mum says very clearly she's got 3 other boys. All of them are at college. And Quincy is at home, doesn't trust men, doesn't know what to do, doesn't want to move out of home because they all thought this was their big shot. They all thought they'd found the person that was going to help mold them into the man, the young man they wanted to be. And instead, they found a liar who took advantage of them.
Actually, I'm going to play a little devil's advocate here. How did you know to trust all the boys in that, in the sense that, like, my mind was like, well, when they got there, didn't they realize that this pretty quickly that this had gone sideways? Did they really have these dreams that this was going to lead to a Division I scholarship? Because the way you look at it, Monday Morning Quarterback, they should have known that this was not what it was being advertised as pretty quickly.
And I think by and large they did. I think it operates on two levels. One of the pieces of criticism that we've seen a lot over Twitter has been very fun for us since the film came out. There's a lot of very passionate opinions. One of them is like, the parents should have known. It's the parents' fault. These kids, he reached out directly to the kids. Their Twitter feed is just direct DMs to the kids, direct Instagram messages to the kids, selling them, right? So by the time this stuff kind of reached the parents, the kids were hook, line, and sinker sold. Right? He had these videos of like this massive facility. He had these letters from these colleges. He had, even today, like in the film, he at the end, he's like, Pahokee, we just got a letter from Pahokee. We're going to get him into college. Like, sure, we're going to get him into college. Like he can't stop with those lies. So the parents are put in this position where their kids are sitting there going, this is my dream. This has been my dream since I was 8. And here's somebody who's offering me a version of it. And that dream, for the majority of these kids, was gone, right? Like it was over. There wasn't really a path forward for them to a D1 or to the NFL or anything like that, right? The majority of these kids, that moment are passing by, but tell that to a 17-year-old. Hey, get a new dream, 17-year-old. Your dream's over. You want to be that person? Do you think their mum wants to be that person? So the parents are balancing, on the one hand, something that does smell fishy with telling their kids their dream's over. And I don't judge them for that.
It reminded me a little bit of the great sports documentary Hoop Dreams, where there were these teenagers who had these unrealistic fantasies about their sports dreams. Like that, I came away with that vibe, and I remember being that age and having some fantasies too. I think it's a real susceptible age to that kind of dream.
Yeah. Shouldn't you dream when you're young? Shouldn't you dream? Shouldn't we support you as you dream, even if as you get older you have to change those dreams and readapt those dreams? Should you be blamed for ignoring a few red flags at a young, impressionable age because you're told, work really, really hard, come here, put everything into it, and you will get your dream. I've got this. And then you get there and every week you're like, maybe you don't got this. Maybe you don't got this. But what do? Quincy, actually, again, bring him up again. He says it really clearly. He saw the education part of it. He got there. He went to school primarily, it's one young man, Quincy, because he needed a small bump in his ACT. Very small. And he got there and he went to the school that they said that they were going to be studying at. And they got there and the doors to the school were locked. And they didn't go in and then they never went back again. And he's like, it's in the film. He says, I wanted to call my mom and tell her that this wasn't real, but I didn't want to tell her that. I didn't know what to say. He's 17, 18 years old. He's confused and he and then he gets to the point, he's from the year where Roy beat a homeless man that was breaking. There's a homeless man trying to break into Roy's car and they discover it one morning and Roy beats the homeless man brutally with a belt and kind of invites the other kids to join in. Some of whom do. Quincy stood at the back and he's like, I don't want any part of that. I know what this is now. There were breaking points for most of these kids.
Oh, another
JD
one.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, Martin. Desmond Rowe, just want to reintroduce you, the director, one of them, of BS High, which is about Bishop Sycamore, which is a high school football team that turned out to be not affiliated with a high school at all. It was all just a con perpetrated by the coach, Roy Johnson. And as you can tell, there was some real trauma with some of these young men who went to go play for Bishop Sycamore. And you mentioned about the scene where they beat the homeless man who's breaking into his car. There's another scene, and Roy does have to answer for this, where he's beating up his girlfriend in front of one of the players who came to live with him. I mean, there's that. Roy Johnson Perloff was taking out PPP loans in the kids' names. The kids thought they were grants, that they wouldn't have to pay them back. I think, Martin, when you watch the film and you get so incensed, really, on behalf of these kids and at this coach, and how could he keep conning these young kids? But he never got in trouble. And in some ways, it's not satisfying at all because the bad guy never gets his comeuppance. Like, how did he skate on all of this?
Yes, I mean, it was frustrating for us too as we made it. And actually, we had quite a lot of people being like, why didn't it end with him in trouble? It's like, well, we are a documentary film crew.
Yeah, right. You're not the police.
Not the legal system of Ohio. Yeah. Like, I'm sorry that it was annoying at the end. It was annoying for us too. And I think that there's two parts to that. One part is, he is in trouble legally. We didn't go into it too much. He's hundreds of thousands of dollars in unpaid bills. He actually, with his card at the end, he got arrested right after the film was done. He was doing fraudulent something to do with identity fraud to try and buy 2 TVs from a Best Buy under the name like Theodore Herschel or something like that. And he got away with that. But then as he's walking out, he tried to palm something and he got busted for that. And so he does keep getting himself in trouble. But in terms of the school, in terms of the big picture, the law says that as they registered as a religious school and they do not take any money from the government. So in terms of the school, there is nothing. One of the things that happened is at the beginning of the process, Mike DeWine, the governor of Ohio, began he did a big press conference and did a big announcement. We're going to get to the bottom of this. Something bad happened here. We're going to hold people accountable. And they did a 70, almost 80-page report on this. And they discovered legally, in terms of the school, there was nothing that they could do. And so at that point, the governor's office had agreed that we could interview him. But then when it came back and they realized they couldn't do anything, they ghosted us. They stopped replying our calls. So that, and then on the other side of it, like all of the fraud that we discovered that is legal crimes, we are hoping that something does happen about that. Again, that's not up to us. But we have provided, he admits, there is somebody talking about check fraud, like in the thing, like I believe her, I don't believe him. And, you ask who to believe. This is an investigative piece, right? This is still an active story. We gave Roy an opportunity to respond to every accusation that the film makes. And some of them, he admits that he drove over a gaggle of geese and killed them in order to give a lesson to some of the kids. He admits that. He denies the PPP loans. He denies the check fraud. Some of it, I have my own opinions on exactly where the truth lies on some of those things, but the majority of the things that are in the film are basically categorically true. And there's a significant amount of fraud that somebody should take a look at, in our opinion.
Martin, can you talk about the process of trying to interview ESPN and IMG Academy? You said in the documentary that neither would respond to this, because some of the most powerful parts were listening to the ESPN announcers call this game. And I was thinking, how did this happen from their side? It's just stunning.
Well, yeah, like the ESPN announcers actually, in some ways, are the story. If the ESPN announcers if they'd been able to, they watched this game and they were scared for the kids playing it. Simply no way about it. Like on one level, they were like, this is so mismatched. And it's not a mismatched basketball game. It's a mismatched football game. Like the quarterback hurts it. It hurts his arm, gets smacked so hard. The backup quarterback gets run over like he's a 9-year-old repeatedly, right? Like they're watching the thing and they're afraid. And so they can't stop themselves from calling out what happened. Things happen like the first kid who tears his ACL, his name's not on the roster. His number's not even on the roster. So they just can't contain themselves. They're like, this is shameful, effectively, is what they're saying. It should not be allowed to happen. And those are the paid employees of ESPN, their job is to hype this thing up. Their job is to make this thing, and they can't do it. And it was ultimately that gap between what they were supposed to do and what they ended up doing that set the media world alight and finally shined a light on this con. And we actually, our primary ask for ESPN was for that access to them, and they denied it because they're employees. And how culpable is ESPN? In my opinion, like they did hire this guy Joe Mamone, who is the guy that you hire to vet schools. They did that, but on the other hand, this team turned up with no medical support staff, no trainers. Is there no vetting process for the games that they put on TV? Like, is there nothing? So there's no way ESPN would not have looked bad. IMG is more complicated. The issue is whether they should have taken the game knowing what they knew about the thing, but we're not 100% sure what they knew. That's kind of what we wanted to get into with them. But I suppose there's ultimately no upside for them in investigating this with us.
Does Roy Johnson ever coach another football game?
he should not. I mean, if you watch this film and you decide that you want your child to be coached by Roy Johnson, I don't know what to tell you. Like we worked very, very hard on this one. Like there's so many docs, right, in this space, Fire Festival, Inventing Anna, Tinder Swindler, where the con man at the heart of it, or con woman at the heart of it, it's so much fun what they're doing that you kind of, the moral kind of hammer side of it, like, you know, you're like, I know the Fire Festival guy ended up going to jail, but in the sense of the movie, you're not that outraged, right? You know, you want to help that lady that didn't get her money, but those people didn't ruin 40, 50 kids a year for 4 years, and they would have just kept doing it indefinitely. What Roy did was to children. Whether those children are 17 or 19 doesn't matter to me. Like, I know it matters in terms of whether they should be playing football, but they were in that bubble where they and we expect them to be protected. And he did not. There's one story. Here we go. I'll give you one. The end of their first year, when they were called a different name, called Christians of Faith, they played St. Francis Academy, which is another IMG level school. It was the last game scheduled for the season. By the time they got to that season, they had lost every single other game up to that point. They'd also not paid any of the bills for the bus rentals. So the buses that were taking them to the games refused to take them. So they got a few minivans and a few cars, and they shipped all the kids out there. And the kids got there, and they were 2.5 hours late. I think it might be a little off on that, but they were basically the whole game late. And they get there. St. Francis is still there. They're still prepared to play, but there's only 2/3 of the kids there because of the transport. They're super late. Only like 5 or 6 of the kids suit up. They just don't want to play. They're demoralized. They're sad. They're confused. And so Roy's like, if you won't play, screw you guys. And he got back in the vans and he left. And he left the kids on the side of the road in a different state from where he picked them up.
Jeez.
If you want that guy to coach your kids, you do you.
Yeah. Martin Desmond Rowe, one of the directors of BS High. There's no way you got to watch it, you know? And you said in this day and age, not just with this documentaries where you're kind of like maybe rooting for the, you know, the supposed villain. There's also been an epidemic in sports documentaries where you're just glossing over a lot of the bad stuff that happens. This documentary doesn't do that. And so it's definitely worth your time. Martin, thank you so much. Congratulations on the film, and hope to talk with you again down the road.
Oh, I'd love that. Thank you so much for your time. Be well.